Hi, this is Sally Morgan, physical therapist, craniosacral therapist, and Tellington T-Touch practitioner for animals and people. This is Tristan, he's a Corgi, and we're here for an episode of Conversations with a Corgi. And this Corgi's had a lot to say this morning because the neighbors who moved in across the street have the Comcast guy here, and he is on a ladder 2 stories up right in front of Tristan's room where he sits to look out the window all day. So, thank God it's not icy because I would be worried for him. But we are having ice and snow and rain later today. Another fun day in winter in New England. So today we're going to finish some talks about our fascial system and some treatments for fascial restrictions. And then we will go into each one of those in more detail as the days unfold, each one of those treatment techniques. So first, just a little quick refresher because it has been a week since we talked about fascia. Fascia is a substance that is in the body. It surrounds, protects, and supports every piece of cell and organ in your body. And we talked about the muscles, which are layers of fascia. There's little bundles of muscle cells surrounded by fascia. Those bundles are bundled together and have fascia around them, and more bundles are bundled together and have fascia around them, and then more until you have a muscle, and fascia surrounds the tendons and ligaments at the ends of the muscles. Fascia surrounds the bone. Periosteum is actually fascia. So fascia is sort of a broad term for a lot of different tissues in the body. One of the important things we know about fascia is that it conducts electricity better than any other tissue in the body, including nerves. So your body can transmit signals of pain and protection really quickly through the fascial system. And it's really important to pay attention to your fascia. I think if people understood their fascial system better, we might see fewer people getting injuries in sports and yoga and just general life. Walking your dog on a very cold day without warming up, or starting to run without warming up, really can injure your fascia system as well as the muscles and make it harder for those to heal. So then we talked about how fascia has tissues in the body that are oriented either lengthwise or vertically. If Tristan can stand up, Bissy, put your buns up. And you can see him. Here we have horizontal fascia going down the legs. He says it's very slippery on your pants, Mom. Going down the legs, we have vertical fascia. It's a little more horizontal in the neck, and then it changes direction throughout other parts of the body at all of the joints. So down in his little wrist here, which some people think of as the knee, although the knee is in the back of the dog, we have horizontal fibers. Down here by his toes, which corresponds to the base of your hand, those are horizontal fibers. All the joints in the body have horizontal fibers. Your shoulder, your elbow, your wrist, your knee, your hips, your ankles. But generally the fibers there are oriented vertically. And there's more technical ways to talk about that, but I'm trying to make this accessible for everyone. And so when you have problems in your fascial system, we talked about the idea of getting gum in your hair and different ways to get the gum out. And what you really need to do to free up your hair is to get the fibers oriented the way the hair goes. So my hair's growing down. If I had gum in my hair and it was all sorted up like this, to get the gum out, I need to straighten the hairs so that they're going the direction they want to go. We talked about the idea of a light force held over a long period of time to help unwind what's going on in that gum wad and straighten the hair back out. And we also looked at this little model, which is a kid's toy. It bends nicely in every direction. I can fold it flat in a couple of different directions. And then we put restrictions in it by bending up some of them and hooking them on other sides. And now we can see that it has a little movement this way, but not so much this way. And so that is kind of what happens to your fascia when it gets a restriction in it. So we're going to talk about 2 general ways to release fascial restrictions today. And then after that, we will go on and talk about some more specific types of therapy to release your fascia. So one of the things that you can do, and this is in craniosacral therapy and quite a few other modalities, you put your hands on either side of the fascial restriction and you take up the slack in the tissue, meaning like, see how this is bouncy? I'm going to go down into it. And then I just follow it where it wants to go. It does not move this way, it moves that way. I don't know if you can see it moving under my hand. See how it's going that way, but it won't go that way. So I just let my hand sink in, sink in, sink in, sink in, and keep following it and following it and following it wherever it wants to go. And this is very subtle. You cannot see a person's hand moving generally when they're doing this work. But in your body, it feels like 3 strong men pushing you sometimes, depending on where your restriction is. And so as I'm doing this, these restrictions I put in are going to start to loosen up. So I'm following it this way. This one really wants to get out from where I stuck it, but it can't quite do it. So I'll give it a little help there. And then things change, and now we're moving that way, and it's shifting so that this one on this side will get unrestricted. Boy, I really jammed that one in there. So that ultimately, as you keep going through the layers, so I've already released 2 restrictions, there's only 1 left. Keep going through the layers, follow it the direction it wants to go, and your top hand is generally moving, not the bottom hand. Follow it the way it wants to go. There we go. It's got 1 little one left. And then eventually it comes back together and we can bend it in any direction it wants to go. So what we also talk about with fascial restrictions is thinking about them as like the busy intersections in town. You tend to have a lot of accidents where there's a lot more cars and where there's a lot more transition from this way to this way, and it's the same with the fascia. So a lot of us have joint problems, or if we have fibromyalgia or something like that, often the joints, rheumatoid arthritis, the joints are more sore and painful and inflamed than other parts of the body. So myofascial work can really help release some of those restrictions around the joints. So the first way, as I just showed you, is to just sink into the tissue and follow it. There's another technique where you put your hands on the tissue and you test it in 3 directions. This is called the triplanar release. So you go this way, see it likes that way better. Then you test it right to left, it likes this way better. So you go as far as it'll go that way, hold it, and then you do the rotation. So I'm turning it this way, and you hold it until it releases, which is, as we talked about with fascia, a long time. A light force over a long time is how it releases. So my hand really has, in cranial work, we talk about the weight of a nickel. And then that can vary because that weight is going to be what the tissue, 5 grams against the restricted tissue. So you may have to squish through several layers on the outside to get to that restricted piece at 5 grams. And I'm just holding this, and you can hear it clicking as it's releasing when I did that triplanar release. So again, I just put my hands on, mostly my top hand's doing the work. We're testing it this way and that way, seeing which way it likes to go as far as it'll go, test it side to side, go as far as it'll go, and then add that rotation at the end. Hold it 2, 3, 5, 10 minutes, depending on how much experience you have, and then it will spring back to its normal position. So those are just a couple of ways to do a fascial release, and then there's much more detail in other systems of working with fascia. Another technique which they do in myotherapy is to push into the restriction with a lot of force. And sometimes it's quite specific force, like just a couple of fingers pushing in that area. The way that they feel this works is that you deprive those cells of oxygen. They shut off. It's like rebooting your computer. And then as you release the pressure, they spring back to life. And it works. All of this works, but for different restrictions in different people and different therapists doing the work. Some work better than others for certain things. So it's really important to go to someone who has a grasp on all of these techniques in order to get your best results. So those are a couple of the things that you can do with fascia to release it. And again, it's like going to the intersection. If you have an accident at a big, busy intersection and there's a car stuck in the middle, then everything around it is restricted. And if you don't move that car, you're going to have a big problem at that intersection for days and days and days and weeks until you get the extra car out of the way. And that's kind of what myofascial release can do, is move that car out of the way. Maybe for a couple of days there's some debris in the road, so it'll be a little bumpy. And then gradually a week later, after the cleanup, you never even know there was an accident. And that is the miracle of myofascial therapy. And remember, I also teach yin yoga, where you hold a position for a long time, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes in some cases, or longer. And that again allows that tissue to deform into a new position, so that when you move again, you have more range and more flexibility and mobility than you had before you held that restriction. So we also talked before a little bit about invasive and non-invasive techniques, and now we're going to just mention a little bit about direct and indirect techniques. Mostly what I do are indirect techniques. Indirect techniques move in the direction of ease, the way the tissue wants to go. So if I put a restriction in this guy, he wants to move that way. I just released him already. He wants to move that way. So we're going in the direction of ease. So we're following it where it wants to go. In a indirect or direct technique, you go into the direction of the restriction. So you're going to push it forward where it doesn't want to go. And that takes a lot more effort from me, but you can see it still releases the restriction. So again, mostly what I do is non-invasive techniques. Non-invasive techniques can, as we talked about before, we talked about surgery being kind of invasive, but we also mentioned my friend Dr. Bernie Siegel, who talks to the body, asks it to help him. He's engaged in a real dialogue with the organs and tissues in the body when he's doing surgery, and that is non-invasive. So given that I'm a holistic therapist and I look at the body as a whole, and I want to look at the body as a system, I tend to choose almost always non-invasive techniques, because I want to go where the body wants to go, because that's the body's message to me, telling me what it needs to find at maximum health and function. And there's plenty of good reasons why people do direct techniques, and certainly like chiropractic has been considered a direct technique because it's a big force with a short duration, kind of the opposite of that idea of a light force for a long time. However, when I do chiropractic, I then do body work, all kinds of soft tissue technique over the area where I've moved that joint. And that sometimes is just enough to get a little movement to really stuck and restricted muscles to be able to allow that movement in a non-invasive way, in an indirect way. So there's a place in the world for every kind of therapy, but I tend to choose indirect techniques because I want to go where the body's telling me to go. That just feels right to me, and it's easy for me to do that. So that's a little bit more about the fascial system. Tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about one of the techniques that you can seek out if you have fascial problems, and get those accidents cleared up from the intersections in your body. This has been Sally Morgan and Tristan Corgi for another episode of Conversations with a Corgi. I have to go over to the hospital today for a while. And we also found out little Tristan, I want to get a little brother for him at some point, not necessarily now, but I found out that his dad, Buddy, who is DM clear, is going to have another litter this year. He's 18 or 14 or 18. Yeah, right. He's 14 coming up in the spring. So this might be my last chance to get another little Tristan. So I might be getting a puppy this year, a little sooner than I wanted. I like to get one when my other dog's 10, but Tristan will be 9. So that's good news. I'm pretty excited about Buddy trying to make some more little Tristans. Thanks for joining us today. We've had just enough snow to make it pretty, less than half an inch. It's going to all melt. Thank you for all the hearts, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow morning for some more talk about the fascia. Have a good day. Oh, you're getting another pup this spring. Yay, Danny. Yeah, hopefully the snow won't be over his head when you get him. It is so hard to find a new dog. And such a blessing when you get one. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Pat. Play with your puppy.